To say that the Star Wars sequel trilogy is an interesting collection of films, I think would be an understatement. The levels of hate and praise these movies receive is wild. As a lifelong Star Wars fan myself, that's also started to fall a bit out of favor with it, mostly due to its oversaturation. Sorting out my feelings about these films is nothing short of a challenge, to say the least. Still, I do believe I have some worthwhile thoughts to contribute to the conversation. My MO isn't really to convince you that this movie is good or terrible, but to highlight what may be the saddest part about it, the missed potential, as well as attempt to understand why we like and dislike features of it. Anyway, I don't really know how to do intros, so let's just go. There really is no better place to start than the main character, the quote-unquote Mary Sue herself.
Rey Skywalker.
Hold up, that's the wrong film. She ain't got a last name yet. Regardless of what Rey might become as the films progress, how she was set up in episode 7 was to be, and I'll let JJ put it, a
mystery box.
With that in mind, I could see what JJ was trying to do with Rey, attempting to make her importance purposefully confusing, not only to herself, but also the audience. Rey is, if nothing else, a mystery. Personally, I'm indifferent about whether or not Rey is some sort of enigmatic figure in this universe that just doesn't understand her true purpose, or even why she's able to perform the feats she does.
I don't know!
It makes the idea of her character interesting to discuss, if only to speculate about the mystery it presents. It doesn't exactly make her character admirable or sympathetic. What I think does that, and at the very least makes her likable, is that she is willing to put aside her own desires for the sake of this little roly-poly droid, and that she dearly misses her parents. It's a bit of a shame she doesn't solidly stick to the goal of helping BB-8 all the way through the flick. I mean, she just kinda tells him she's out, but that he's in good hands with a dude that's currently having relationship issues, and a guy that's so shook by the First Order that he literally misplaced the blaster the dude with relationship issues just gave him. But at minimum, these are admirable and relatable characteristics for your main character to have, especially one in a piece of Star Wars fiction. Still, being likable is more of a bonus than a hard requirement when attempting to conjure up a character. It can be beneficial for a piece of fiction that draws a more perceptible line between good and evil like Star Wars, but I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast rule that gives you no room to experiment. Plus, I doubt most viewers are completely sold on Rey's small bit of goodwill alone. I think the bigger issue a lot of people have with her is that the fiction misconstrues the mystery about her character for her character, and by extension the development of. It's the reason why when this movie dropped, everyone was going crazy about who Rey's parents might be, not who Rey is as a person. Basically trying to play the metafiction mystery game. Frankly, I don't blame anyone who did. As I said, I'm not really for or against parts of her characterization being obtuse or vague, but the more you make a mystery out of her, the less the audience has a chance to really understand her. As a result, I think people dislike Rey because she's an extremely confusing character to attempt to understand, despite the virtuous goals she pursues in the film. She isn't a character that people can accept as someone who misses her parents because she's a human being that just desperately wants parental figures in her life. She's a character that people can't accept not having some kind of special bloodline that explains why she's such a powerhouse. And honestly, I ain't mad at that. People do want to understand the characters being presented to them. It gives them meaning, gives them depth, gives the audience more substantial reasons to like or dislike them. When so much of your character's traits and motivations are being presented to the audience in such a vague fashion, but the fiction still expects the audience to believe that the character genuinely knows what they're doing at times, it can start to make the character come across as insincerely written. The fiction doesn't feel like it's genuinely attempting to agreeably handshake with the viewer's suspension of disbelief. What is being shown to them doesn't feel convincing enough, and it forces people to grab onto any thin piece of thread they can in attempts to convince themselves. Overthinking. Something I'm doing right now. What I find extremely interesting is that a lot of the issues people have with Rey have pretty simple solutions. These solutions are what gives the film such a big feeling of missed potential to me, because implementing some of them would have given JJ and his team so much more to work with. Take the idea of Take the idea of Rey being a ship pilot, for instance. When she's first introduced, she could have been, say, piloting a cargo ship to Jakku. I think this is a pretty easy and simple way to establish that she's a licensed pilot. I believe the team was so concerned about conveying to the audience that Rey is trapped on Jakku, a la Luke Skywalker trapped on Tatooine, that they neglected other ways that you can show this idea. Rey doesn't have to be trapped on a planet for the audience to know she's still stuck in a boring life by Star Wars standards. Being a glorified delivery girl doesn't sound any more exciting to me than being a farm boy, even if it's delivery across the galaxy. Scavenging can also just be something she enjoys doing as a hobby and serves as a side hustle for her. But let's say you still wanted to keep the opening scenes. These scenes still establish that the grind never stops for her on Jakku trying to put food in her stomach. I do think this is worthwhile info. If that's the case, then you can maybe give her a physical pilot's license or some sort of ship-related documentation she can flash to the audience. A pilot's license sounds like something a capable and legal ship pilot would have on their person at all times. It may not be a concept the audience would be familiar with in the films, but it's certainly a precedence you could reasonably create. I believe this not only plays nicer with the viewer's suspension of disbelief, but also gives you more opportunities to create more substantial mystery about Rey. For instance, what if that same pilot's license is fake? What if that cargo ship she flies is stolen? Hell, you can even keep the mystery of her parents as well while making her less Jakku crazy. She's a goddamn grown woman.
Stop taking my hand!
Or at the very least one that knows how to take care of herself. The amount of concern she has for staying on Jakku purely for her parents' sake can only be described as contrived for a character that's this self-sufficient and has probably been living on her own for years now. There are other ways you can create sympathy for a character that misses their parents. Additionally, who's to say her parents can't just wait for her in the event they show up when she's not on the planet? Now what about all the insane feats Rey pulls off? I think engaging in the mysticism of Star Wars can still do a lot of heavy lifting here. I'm down with the idea of Rey having very limited skill in the Force already. I think it's a dope way to show she's talented with it. Issue is, her skill isn't really that limited, like at all. Also, I don't think it helps that when Han is telling Finn and Rey about the Jedi and the Force, it's treated as this huge revelation to them. While I can accept the possibility of Luke being unable to fully spread the good word of the Force across the galaxy before the Fire Nation attacked, Finn should definitely already be familiar with its applications because he just saw Kylo go to work with it at the start of the flick. At the very least, a hamster wheel should be turning in his head about what he saw with Kylo in relation to what Han is talking about in this scene, allowing them to compare notes on the situation, and also help make Finn's Resistance Fighter cover more believable to Rey.
I've never met a Resistance fighter before.
As far as Rey goes, in the same moment, the concept of the Force can still be a revelation to her even if she's already gotten some functional use out of it. As human beings, just because we're familiar with something functionally doesn't necessarily mean we're also familiar with it conceptually. After that, she can then perhaps slightly nudge a small object in the room with the Force to confirm with Han and Finn that this is what they're talking about. The Force is real, and Rey now has a known talent with its telekinetic function that better sets up her big Force pull of the lightsaber during the fight with Kylo. The biggest roadblock here is that I don't believe that's what JJ wanted. I think he wanted Rey to be completely oblivious to, and sometimes even scared of, her own talent and connection with the Force up until the very end of the movie. To essentially be an idiot savant. Keeping this in mind, you still have to consider balancing the precedents set up for Rey's feats in relation to how impressive those feats are, and I can agree the film might go a bit overboard in this respect at times. The biggest example being Rey not only resisting Kylo's Force interrogation technique, but using it against him. What I think makes this accomplishment so incredible is not only are these two skills in combination easily Jedi mastered to Grand Master levels of proficiency, she is also doing it completely subconsciously. Anytime Rey tangibly taps into the Force, she does it in a way that suggests she has no idea what she's doing.
I can't explain it, and you wouldn't believe it.
This is fine for the most part, but as a result, it doesn't just suggest that Rey is talented with the Force, but exceptionally so. Like, a level of talent we can reasonably infer has never been witnessed before in this universe. Now, this doesn't necessarily also suggest that she has more power in her pinky finger than Darth Vader and Luke combined, but what it does suggest is that she's probably more in tune with the Force than any untrained Force user has ever been. Kylo alludes to this after the interrogation session with her, and I think this is the suggestion the fiction is trying to achieve. What ultimately leads me to believe this is what I consider Rey's best character moment in the film. In her fight against Kylo, there's the infamous part where she closes her eyes and lets the Force activate her Ultra Instinct. The reason why I believe this is her best moment is because it's the only instance where she isn't confused or scared about the Force, and is instead using advice someone else told her about it.
Close your eyes. Feel it.
Regardless of how dumb you think that advice is, this gives her somewhat believable confidence in a largely unknown and sometimes frightening ability to her. She's learned a way to consciously use the Force in a do-or-die situation. Unfortunately, what still makes this moment fall flat despite this is that it isn't as impressive as all the other things she's done with the Force, with less applied knowledge of it, up until that point. In JJ's relentless pursuit of Star Wars mysticism, I think the film severely undermines what should be a genuinely iconic moment for Rey. Since she's already displayed Grandmaster level skill over the Force, subconsciously or otherwise, I sympathize with the audience when rolling their eyes in irritation as she finally starts to show signs of conscious ability. Much more when the display of that ability is a wet fart in comparison that still sees her bodying Kylo. I think if you just tone down her subconscious use of the Force and give the end of her climactic battle more immediate punch, like her using a really powerful and violent Force push, you'd still have all of the intrigue with less people going, "What? What the fuck?" I don't think Rey has to beat Kylo here either. The scrap could prematurely end in a stalemate considering the planet splits between them anyway. Something to keep in mind is that Rey winning here means that Kylo's the one that has to work on some new jutsu, not Rey, meaning the audience has more reason to care about Kylo's progression over Rey's going forward. She's already proven she can clap Kylo's cheeks, and it's not like she's going to get weaker. Kylo already confirmed that her power grows the longer she's left unchecked.
The longer it takes to find her, the more dangerous she becomes.
Imagine how strong she'll be by the next movie if she's already consciously tapping into her Nine Tails chakra. What I'm saying is, if you want the audience to care about and like Rey in this moment, which I'm only guessing the fiction does based on the progression she's already received during this fight, then I don't think it hurt for the fight to end on a more ambiguous note. Not only would this be notably different from the OT, since none of the duels there ended in a draw, but it also allowed the audience to care more about both Rey's and Kylo's progressions. Either way, the scenes where she counters Kylo's Force interrogations and uses Jedi mind trick can easily be revised without losing too much. The info that Kylo is looking for in Rey's head can easily be unreliable because Rey's memory is possibly inaccurate, thus still making that info useless to Kylo upon confirmation. You could also just have the Force protect that one small part of Rey's psyche without Rey completely flipping the script on the Kylo. In both instances, you lose Rey exposing Kylo's insecurities, but I don't think that's a necessity to the scene, nor do I think it's something you can explore later on in the trilogy. Kylo's reaction afterwards I think is more important, which is why I'd personally go with the latter option. But there also isn't anything that says you can't write that into their climactic fight instead. In terms of the Jedi mind trick scene, you could just have Finn and the gang actually rescue Rey, that's an option. It wouldn't make me think any less of her as a character, and it probably allow the audience to care more about her as well. But if you absolutely must have Rey free herself, then just have her use the Force to flip a switch in the room that releases her restraints. Hell, you could even make a joke out of her trying to figure out which switch it is, causing funky stuff to happen with each one. The stormtrooper that's watching her will probably just think that the room is going haywire, and maybe one of the funky things happening ends up incapacitating him before he can call for maintenance, thus giving Rey a blaster to work with, all while still keeping the idiot savant vibes, just on a scale that I don't think completely deflates the finale. Rey being an untrained but talented Force user, I'm all for it. That idea is peak Star Wars to me. All I'm saying is to reel in her limits a bit and give the audience more reasons to care about more than just who her parents are. She still gets to keep all of the mysticism and her confused and scared nature of it. You just gain a more satisfying rise in her talents, allowing her to ascend into what I believe would truly make her an iconic Star Wars character.
Come on, BB-8, tell her.
The Ilenium system.
So I mentioned BB-8 earlier, our little roly-poly droid companion. I think most people agree he's one of the brighter spots in this film. I have yet to come across a droid companion that I didn't like in any piece of Star Wars fiction. What always makes droids like BB-8 so charming is the way they express themselves. Just beeps and boops and some pantomiming. It can be pretty impressive how much mileage you can get out of such limited forms of communication when every character is an expert in droidese. Or maybe that makes it less impressive. Either way, I think it's telling how formulaic the droid companion is in Star Wars, yet it never stops being entertaining. Like R2 before him, BB-8 holds the keys to the film's entire plot within his circuitry. That particular set of keys being the map piece that will allow our heroes to locate Luke Skywalker. I'm pretty sure plenty of people reacted to this information in either confusion or intrigue. Or both. But I'd say intrigue was more the mood here. Regardless, either reaction beckons for several questions to be answered, such as, why did Luke go into hiding? What does his closest friends and family think about him going into hiding? My personal favorite one is, who made the map? Where did the rest of it come from, and why was it missing this piece at all? Whatever you make of these questions, the Luke Skywalker mystery box is officially floating around in your dome. The mystery of Luke's location isn't really the issue here. I think it's fine for Luke to be missing. What does it for me is the mystery context surrounding Luke's location. I think it might have done some good if JJ asked himself and his team some of these questions as well. Maybe he did and just thought they weren't worth entertaining, but I think a mystery is only as good as the clues you get towards solving it. So where are the breadcrumbs? When thinking about it like that, it can seem like all the interesting stuff actually happens before the film even starts, because that's essentially where the rest of the plot's breadcrumbs are in the form of the rest of the map. As I mentioned with Rey, being more forthcoming with information could allow more opportunities to create more mystery out of it. I don't need to know exactly who created the map, just that their existence is acknowledged, and that they have a reason for creating it that I, as the viewer, and the characters in the piece of fiction can speculate about. Considering any of these options would almost completely remove the need for R2's Deus Ex Machina, and you'd actually give yourself the opportunity to create a convincingly mysterious character in the map's cartographer. I also find it strange that the map's wider potential isn't even acknowledged. Just because the map's purpose to the plot is finding Luke doesn't mean that every character in the story would necessarily want it exclusively for that purpose.
That's gotta be kidding!
We're ostensibly talking about a map that possibly leads to a remote part of the galaxy where no one would ever find you. That sounds like something a character like Finn would want more than anything in this movie. Something that refugees caused by this Resistance First Order war would possibly need more than anything as well. Reliably safe asylum, an untouchable Resistance headquarters location. Yet these possibilities don't even get a passing throwaway line from any of our heroes. The map is only about Luke.
I can't believe I was so foolish to think I could find Luke and bring him home.
I don't even think this is for the sake of a mystery. I think JJ just honestly believes that Luke Skywalker is more important to the Resistance than an unknown location in the galaxy that only they have the full information on. Not even Leela could have tunnel vision this bad. But this does tell me that JJ truly has respect and reverence for the character of Luke Skywalker. Just maybe a little too much.
Lisa.
And while I think it's better to have too much than not enough respect, I believe the fiction still suffers from it as a result. But overall, I think the plot is still fine though. It just kinda gets in its own way at times. What should feel like an urgent race to find Luke feels more like a slow, clumsy relay where each baton pass is fumbled, you know? The event is still entertaining and the participants still got to the finish line, but it just leaves you wondering where we could have optimized some things. Now let me try to explain my favorite plot point in the entire film. So Han tells Rey, Finn, and BB-8 that if they want to continue their journey, they'll need a new ship as the Falcon is too risky to keep traveling on. Han says Maz is the perfect person to acquire a ship from, but when Han asks Maz about it, her response is,
No. I've seen evil take many forms. The First Order. We must face them. Fight them. All of us.
If I'm to believe that Maz is supposed to be the old, intelligent, and wise hag character, then why does her sentiment basically boil down to
Win! Win, 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 win! Yeah! Fuck everything else!
No.
Win, 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 win! These niggas ain't shit! Ah! Win, 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 win!
like, what does she think our heroes are doing? Giving Rey a tour of the galaxy? They need a ship from her so they can safely deliver a vital piece of information to the Resistance that's fighting the First Order. Instead of acknowledging that first, this old crushed can of Fanta just starts gassing up the ops. Like we ain't just see these niggas carpet bomb a whole bazaar just to capture a droid that's roughly the size of your average table fan. I mean, you gotta try a little harder to convince the audience that Maz has some kind of insight on the situation that no other character in the scene has. It comes off as meaningless mystical Yoda babble because she isn't saying anything that the audience and the characters don't already know, despite how much Rey makes an earnest attempt to play dumb here. And since Maz also isn't being very helpful besides telling Finn to take the next plane to Bitchville, I can understand why some people don't like Maz. The plot took us to her because it needed a Yoda equivalent to impart some wisdom onto our heroes. I don't think the team really thought very hard about what kind of wisdom our heroes actually needed though, causing this plot point to trip over itself at such a critical juncture. It makes Maz look like a smooth brain, and I'm pretty sure she wasn't intended to be that. Just look at how many wrinkles her head has alone. Just imagine how many wrinkles JJ thinks her brain should have. It's just that this doesn't translate very well to the fiction. So there's a couple ways I think you could optimize this scene to bring Maz closer to what I believe the fiction wants from her. For one, you could actually have Maz offer the group a gesture of goodwill. Even if she can't help the group immediately and her hands are tied for some reason, simply telling them that and then offering some kind of kind gesture, instead of just straight up saying no, would already be a step in the right direction, I believe. This is what made Yoda likable in episode 5. While he may have been introduced as a crazy old hermit that doesn't know what personal boundary is, Yoda was still kind to Luke. He offered him food and a place to stay on Dagobah, things Luke didn't appreciate very much at the time. And while I'm not saying Maz has to do all that exactly, I mean Rey is already smashing some kind of exotic delicacy here. That's a detail I do appreciate as well, by the way. Rey probably has the worst diet out of everyone in this group by far, but it also wouldn't hurt if Maz actually offered Rey a warm meal either. She's so skinny. She's a skinny white girl. And Maz is an old orange woman. Voiced by a black girl. Okay, I'm making this awkward. But if we have to talk about the dreaded DEI subject, I think this is a good, earnest way to incorporate it as well. The scene could start with a giant plate of food being dropped in front of Rey, with Maz telling her to eat. And then when Rey bashfully tries to turn down the gesture, Maz tells her that she doesn't allow skinny people to leave her cantina on empty stomachs. By the end of the scene, Rey will have finished her plate and possibly be asking for another one, which could be played up for a laugh. Rey accepting an offer like that, as a character that probably grew up eating crap most of her life, I believe would only allow the audience to care more about her and Maz. Another option you could take is to actually have Maz give some worthwhile wisdom. Telling Finn that he's bitch made and giving Rey some advice about the Force later on is good. I don't mind that too much. But I think for this particular scene, we should focus on Han here. Instead of giving this big spiel about fighting the ultimate evil, I think Maz should just be having a genuine dialogue with Han about his situation with Leia. Have her tell him that his partner in love and war needs him. Remind them that Leia is, and has always been, an extremely kind and understanding person. She was, of course, the woman that made first contact with and befriended a bunch of furry beasts out in the middle of the wilderness, remember? Whatever Han did, whether it was due to their son or not, Leia can let go of that pain if it means she gets to be with him again. And then Finn can act as the third wheel of this heart-to-heart that pisses off Maz enough to call him a bitch. I hope that shows what I mean about the plot getting in its own way. It's not like Maz really needed to be a Yoda equivalent here. All she needs to be is helpful to our heroes. She still kind of is by giving Finn a way out that he just straight up changes his mind about at the last second, and by providing him a weapon, but it's all in the most roundabout way possible. And the help she gives Rey to prepare for the fight with Kylo isn't immediately apparent, so it isn't something the audience or Rey can appreciate in that moment. All this is good. I don't think the audience or the characters should just blindly appreciate every bit of help Maz offers them, but I can't deny how flimsy it all still is. These bones need more meat, like Rey needs to eat.
Built, upon which we stand, will bring an end to the Senate. All remaining systems will bow to the First Order, and will remember this as the last day of the Republic.
I'm not even gonna bother addressing the questionable continuity gap here, because I don't really blame anyone for thinking that the Galactic Empire was dope enough to copy almost bar for bar. The idea of the Empire is badass enough for me to cut a little bit of slack. Just know that I still do understand why people were upset with it. What's really a shame, and what I think upsets people the most about the First Order, is that they are just the Empire again, both visually and functionally to the plot. As a consequence, I don't think too many people end up appreciating the new concepts the First Order does introduce, like it being a sort of Axis power, Captain Phasma, and brainwashed foot soldiers. And also a shit ton of possible war crimes, but don't worry about that too much. The Axis power take may confuse you, but stay with me here. The movie has a strangely myopic view of the universe. The First Order is still in the midst of running the galaxy shit. At least, that's what the film suggests. Yeah, they're an extremely powerful force, but also they aren't in complete and total control of the galaxy like the Empire was at the start of the OT. We haven't gotten to The Last Jedi yet, so if a war is already going on between the First Order and resistance forces that reject the First Order's advances, not necessarily rebellious forces that fight for total revolution, then that technically makes the First Order an Axis power fighting against Allied forces. So where are the Allied powers? Seriously, you can't honestly expect the audience to believe that the Hosnian system was the only Allied star system in the whole galaxy, much less label it as the entirety of the New Republic just to subsequently vaporize it with a single shot from your Uber Death Star. That is diabolic levels of disgust towards anything that even resembles politics in this universe. Obi-Wan is probably ready to rematerialize back into his robes right now.
My allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy!
All this does is give yourself less options than George had in the OT, in an era where, theoretically, you should have more options than ever with which to have two superpowers duke it out against each other. I think JJ really wanted his David versus Goliath a la the OT that he just straight up neglects this opportunity, to the point that I don't even think he realized what he had, because if he did, I believe he would have gotten something much closer to World War II in space. I mean, David versus Goliath is still cool, but I don't exactly think JJ broke a sweat when considering these two options either, you know? Then there's Phasma, who is, of course, shrouded in mystery. I don't think Phasma has to be this completely unknown figure that gets very limited screen time for the audience to still find mystery in her. I just want to know how she significantly contributes to the First Order's operations. Some more scenes of her actually being a captain to her troops would be nice. What do Kylo and Snoke think about her? What are her opinions on how Kylo, Snoke, and Imperial Officer number 267 run things? Honestly, I believe you could swap Hux with Phasma and you wouldn't lose much. You'd only gain more developmental potential for the more unique looking character, and more opportunities to make her a bigger mystery. I believe Phasma would make for a much more convincing character to butt heads with Kylo and Snoke, while also keeping a well-respected reputation amongst them and the rest of the First Order, simply because she just looks like that bitch, and should probably be treated as such. Hux the same type of guy Vader would be choking out and immediately replacing in the OT. Sure, Kylo not explicitly doing that is different, but it also would have been even more different with Phasma in that position instead. Shit, I'll even hit you with some more nostalgia here, and also suggest that if Hux were the one being thrown into the trash, literally and metaphorically, it'd actually be a pretty clever homage to the disposable Imperial officer in the OT, without your Vader equivalent even being the one doing the disposing. You may lose the little bits of mockery Finn gets at Phasma's expense.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge now, Phasma. I'm in charge. Bring it down. Bring it down.
But it's not like you can't create a more substantial moment like that later on in the trilogy. Lastly, the brainwashing is the only one I can sort of understand not going all in on. It does suggest that First Order foot soldiers are doing all these horrible things against their will, which introduces a moral tightrope that Disney probably doesn't want to walk. If that's the case, and you also don't want to use clones, then why not just use battle droids again? It's so strange how this film treats the prequels as if they had no good ideas worth iterating on. Basic battle droids were clowns, but it's not like they have to stay that way. And more advanced droids have gotten to the point that they function almost indistinguishably from humanoids anyways. I believe you could still say that even back in 2015. Even if you couldn't, there really isn't anything stopping you from attempting to explore that concept in this universe besides your own imagination and your neglect for the prequels. If stormtroopers were instead battle droid equivalents in this film, I believe JJ could have had his brainwashing cake and eat it too, despite the possibility of Disney breathing down his neck. There's so many ways you could have a combat droid break its protocol and gain some semblance of human morality, while still keeping the First Order's primary fighting force a bunch of faceless copies that the audience shouldn't feel bad about being sent to the big junkyard in the sky. Of course, by extension, this would make Finn an inorganic droid character. which would interfere with the budding romantic relationship he has with Rey, an organic human character. I'll spare you my thoughts on the absolute blasphemy that is a robosexual relationship.
The path to robot hell is paved with human flesh.
And just entertain the interest of keeping Finn organic. Perhaps the First Order is finishing a full robotic army conversion, and Finn is one of the last few organic soldiers still serving. As a result, he also gets treated like crap by his robotic counterparts and by his superiors who once saw value in him. Since he's also now competing against cold and efficient droids, and everyone around him is just waiting until he dies in combat so he can effectively be replaced, like many of his organic peers before him, he catches a mental breakdown, and that's what causes him to defect. Honestly, this could probably work regardless of whether or not the First Order's army is full of droids, because I think that's what's actually happening here. The fiction still wants Finn to be a sympathetic character, and despite how much the movie attempts to simplify him, the idea of Finn's character is still rather complex. While I don't think he needs to be as deep as the average Kendrick Lamar verse, at minimum, I believe Finn needs to give more unique and substantial anecdotal accounts of the Stormtrooper experience. The only pieces of anecdotal evidence Finn gives in the film is that he was a custodian at Starkiller Base.
What was your job when you were based here? Sanitation.
And that the Battle of Jakku Village was his first taste of combat.
On my first battle, I made a choice.
This makes him look more like a Boy Scout than a trained soldier, and since the fiction only wants the audience to believe that the First Order is this big and bad faction that programs its soldiers from birth, carpet bombs populated areas, and blows up local businesses, I don't think it's that strange for the audience to call cap on Finn. The movie is just straight up trying too hard to make sure Finn doesn't have to regret or atone for anything he's done as a stormtrooper, inadvertently making him look like an uninteresting character that also might be a compulsive liar. And while I think a character that can't stop lying can be engaging, I also don't think the film earnestly engages with this idea.
You need a pilot.
Ultimately losing Finn more sympathy points than he gains throughout the story. Again, the idea of exploring a galactic superpower with malevolent intent is cool and worth exploring. Even if it's a rehashed concept by the franchise's standards, the film still has fun and unique ideas to throw into the mix. I like the Axis power angle. I like Phasma. I like the brainwashing. Hell, I also kind of ironically enjoy the fact that the First Order looks closer to a cartoonish terrorist organization than the Empire with all the senseless destruction they cause. Yet the movie doesn't seem to see power in any of these original ideas. I can't get too upset when someone calls the First Order lame because they're just the Empire again, when the things that actually make them unique from the Empire are so understated or unironically goofy. If the fiction doesn't appreciate those qualities that much, then why should the audience?
Cannot deny the truth. That is your family.
You are so right.
Kylo is by far the most fascinating new character introduced in this movie. Despite all the downright evil shit he engages with, like massacring an entire village, subjecting a scavenger girl to intense interrogation techniques even though she's only loosely associated with the Resistance at best, and committing patricide. Oddly enough, there's a lot to like about Kylo. He's a convincingly conflicted character with, let's say, emotional issues. This is in stark and frankly welcome contrast to Darth Vader. While Vader was largely an emotionless and cold machine of a monster, Kylo is pretty much the opposite. Still a monster, but one that strangely garners more sympathy than possibly any other character. Adam Driver did an amazing job selling Kylo, and giving JJ some more credit here, if I had to guess, I believe this is his attempt at mixing Anakin with Vader into a more volatile and raw solution. Because if there's one thing I think he does like about the prequels, it's Anakin Skywalker. Or else why would his lightsaber be here?
I will own your brother's saber.
Damn it, that's the wrong film again! I don't know if this is exactly what the team was going for, but the result is a genuinely intriguing character. Unlike some others that either rely on the mystery to carry them, or are so surface level that even a child can find fun in the puddle they present, Kylo has some layers to him. He's not afraid of the Force like Rey, he's perceptive of it. He wants the full power of the dark side, he's just unsure and conflicted about what he may have to do to achieve it. I think what Kylo is missing the most is more apparent temperamental issues. I find it funny that Kylo is willing to smoke old dude from Jakku at the twitch of his finger, but can't immediately offer the same courtesy to Hux when he starts talking crazy to him. He doesn't have to bop him right then and there, but I believe the threat should be a lot more emotionally charged. His temper tantrums are cool, and I do find them humorous, but I can understand if some people may not take him seriously because of them. If Kylo had more moments where his anger clearly clouded his judgment, instead of it only serving as overblown reactions to clear-cut failure, then I believe we'd be getting even closer to a better representation of his angsty and sometimes entitled persona. But take the last scene he has in Snoke's throne room. After Rey resists his interrogation, he goes straight to Daddy Snoke to cry about it. And then when Hux walks in and suggests that Kylo's simping too hard for Rey, Kylo just sits there like a bitch and lets Hux talk to him like that. Emotions are high in this scene, and if I'm to believe that Kylo is an emotionally unstable character, why isn't he digging into Hux's ass here? I think this would honestly be the perfect time to do it, and then Snoke could yell at both of them to stop acting like babies. I'm pretty confuzzled on why the team chose the subtle route with this power struggle, to the point that it practically makes Kylo look like he's on Hux's leash. Maybe someone believed that Hux having some sort of power over Kylo would even out the power scale between them?
I got mind control over Ren.
Hux doesn't really need direct power over Kylo though, he just needs to not be afraid of him. You could easily assure Hux's safety by way of him constantly reminding Kylo that Snoke, the guy that has power over both of them, would be very angry if Kylo revoked his subscription to life. Sure, maybe this is implied in the film, but again, I don't know why you would favor the more subtle option with a character as emotionally unhinged as Kylo. Let him angrily cook fools, verbally and physically, you know what I mean? I think there's ways you can optimize some of Kylo's other scenes as well, but I'll leave it there.
This is a ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs.
12!
14.
I ain't gonna say too much about Han here, but I suppose I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about legacy characters to some larger degree. Han's purpose to the plot is fine. I like the idea of him having a strained relationship with Leia that was probably caused by Ben, and that he feels like a failure of a lover to Leia and a worse father to his son. I also like the idea of Han dying for Ben's sake. I think that's a fine way to use a character that has a son as conflicted as Ben is. Han's characterization overall is serviceable and in line with the OT, despite how much the movie reverts his development from it. What's more confusing to me is how unnecessary that reversion is. It's not like he absolutely must still be an underground smuggler that makes bad deals with criminals. He could easily just be running trade routes for the Republic, or any other above-board power in the galaxy, thus implying he's using his cargo smuggling skills for the good of it, and not just for his own gain. The scene where he's boarded by gangs would practically play out the same way, with Han using his bad negotiation skills to convince the opposition to reconsider screwing over the Republic like this, failing spectacularly and leading to the same exact events that play out in the film. The only difference here would be Han working a legitimate, if albeit still dangerous, job now. Also, if you go with my suggestion of making Rey a slightly shady delivery girl, it might give Han better opportunities to form a tighter bond with her by way of recognizing all the tricks she pulls. Tricks that he might have pulled when he was a dirty scoundrel. Offering her a legitimate job with the Republic sounds like a much sweeter deal to me too. Now, this bond is made apparent when Rey displays knowledge about the Falcon equal to and maybe even greater than Han's, but I can't deny that it does feel a little forced. Why would Rey care about the deeper intricacies of a ship she herself labeled as a piece of junk? Garbage! She doesn't have to be completely disinterested in ship engineering altogether. As a mechanical scavenger, her knowing the importance of how a hyperdrive or a motivator should function is fine. Those are probably standardized parts across most well-engineered ships she's scavenged before. But the Falcon is not a well-engineered or well-maintained ship. The OT tells us as much. The Falcon's guts are probably jimmy-rigged and heavily modified by Han and Chewie.
I've made a lot of special modifications myself.
This is extra unique knowledge that Rey couldn't possibly have about the Falcon, distinctly making it Han's ship. And since it is Han's ship, Let him school her on it, you know? Again, I don't believe the audience would think any less about Rey if she's dealing with a ship that has guts as incomprehensible as the Falcon probably has. It only allow the audience to appreciate the bond she forms with Han more. How Han lost the Falcon in the first place could be explained by Lando. Maybe his dumbass lost it. I don't think it'd be far-fetched to assume Lando would maybe want to borrow the Falcon on occasion since Han and him are such good friends and all. The actual explanation given in the film is fine though. It's not like there wouldn't be people out there who are bold enough to steal a priceless ship like the Falcon after everything it's done. Also, about Rey calling it garbage upon its introduction, I don't mind this.
What a piece of junk!
In fact, I think it's a good joke that you could run into the ground. The Falcon's whole appeal is that it's a reliably unreliable piece of flying trash. Rey constantly complaining about this whenever she's messing with it, while Han constantly tells her to shut up about it, sounds like a great time to me. The scene that comes to mind is when the electrical overload happens while they're in hyperspace. After Rey gets up to fix it, the next words that come out of her mouth could be something like, "What is this?" implying that she's ran into another one of Han's jury-rigged mechanisms. After Han tells her how to solve it, she can then respond with a snide remark about how much pain Han puts the Falcon through, and that he should probably apologize to it profusely. Han can then tell her that he won't get another chance to apologize if she doesn't fix that overload. Ultimately, I don't believe the film made this joke out of spite, so I don't really think it's worth being angry over, just like the rest of the Legacy package here. They're all used about as well as they were in the OT if we're just considering one film, besides maybe Luke and R2, but that's fine. Other than that, that's all I'll say about them. Now, don't get it twisted. I might have poked fun at him occasionally in this video, but at the end of the day, I'm not trying to roll a newspaper up and smack it over JJ's head like a dog because he and his team wanted to explore mystery and intrigue in Star Wars. By that metric, I still think they did that. Whether or not that's the objectively correct philosophy with which to create a piece of Star Wars fiction, or any piece of fiction for that matter, is a different topic. There's already too many critics online that treat fiction and art as this problem that demands a static and objectively correct solution, when in reality most of these people are just giving their subjective opinions on what they like and dislike about a subject, while hiding it behind the smoke and mirrors of objectivity. On some levels I understand it though. It pays to look smart online if you can convince enough people that your brand of being a smartass is objectively agreeable. Not necessarily objectively right or truthful, but agreeable. It's just that this mindset also implies that if you disagree, then you're objectively a stupid weirdo that likes to eat yellow snow. When played straight, this kind of commentary can seem more ignorant than insightful. If that's the point, then more power to them. I still find stuff like that entertaining, but this endless pursuit of trying to solve art can get tiring at times. Art is dynamic, it's malleable, its objective changes as you create and engage with it. Following a formula is helpful, definitely, but treating a formula as a concrete rule that you must never deviate from is limiting. And art is about being able to recognize when and where to break those rules. Sure, there are plenty of bad actors out there that choose to create things unfaithfully, choose to create something for the purpose of selling a soulless product. It's easy to be cynical about these things, and much harder to say that you like something that everybody else hates, or vice versa. Hell, I'm no stranger to engaging in a cynical roast as well. But critical thinking isn't just about identifying what's objectively correct. It's about coming to a greater understanding of why you like or dislike something. However good, bad, or objectively correct you think those things are, be damned. You don't have to be a snooty know-it-all asshole to express your thoughts about a subject. You just have to be willing to keep an open mind when talking about it. Unless the people you're talking to are actually assholes, I ain't mad at you then. Okay, it's the end of the video, but stick around for a little bit longer, please. I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to be my first video, so go easy on me here. Honestly, Star Wars wasn't exactly at the top of the list of topics to make a first video out of either. Star Wars is something I like talking about, though. But if I'm to keep going with this, I'd actually like to transition into discussing video games. I guess we'll get there if we get there. But, if you guys want me to talk about Episode 8, then, I don't know. Put "Let Rey Eat" in the comments. If you share this video around as well, use it as a hashtag too. And if this project gets a little bit of traction, I'll see what I can do. Anyway, deuces.